Welcome back, everybody, to the Star Wars podcast, where we talk all things Marvel, Star Wars, and everything in between. Please take a moment to check our show notes to find our social media, merch, and more. Today, we are recapping Madam Web in full spoiler details. So if you haven't seen what this is supposed movie, then I would get out of here. And actually, don't even, I mean, what am I saying? You don't, I'm sure Nathan probably will get into it, but you don't have to see it. You really don't have to see this movie. It's completely skippable. So if you just want to listen to the podcast, we get that too. But I am here. I spoiled it already. It is my good buddy Nathan, who's coming with his product placement with Pepsi products and everything in between. How's it going, Nathan?
I'm good. I was in my apartment researching Madam Web right before we went live, so it's been a fun time.
Sounds like a great day.
Yes, exactly.
Nathan, here's the thing. Okay, so we have a relationship that is spanned nearly a decade, and you've always been into the art of a bad movie, right? And I've always told you don't try to get me to watch a bad movie. I don't I just won't. It's painful for me. It's kind of it's almost like I get secondhand embarrassment watching movies like this sometimes. But I have to give you credit because you found a way to get me to watch a very very terrible movie in Madam Web.
Yeah, I was actually thinking while I was watching this, it's like Michael drew the line at Morbius. Like, no, I'm not watching that. But you vouched to go see Madam Web, which, spoiler alert, makes Morbius look like an absolute masterpiece by comparison.
Uh, yeah, here's the thing, and I don't think it's I don't know that we're gonna have resounding shit. I don't think we're gonna change anyone's mind about this movie, right? I think everyone listening to this either hasn't seen it or hates the movie. There's no way anybody likes this movie. So I don't think we have any groundbreaking. We're not gonna change anyone's mind. With that being said, um, I mean, this is. I don't even think Nathan. We had some conversations. You said that there were laugh out loud moments. I don't even know that I got that. It really was, that gif of the baby in the car seat with their teeth sticking out, kind of just looking back and forth. That was me watching this movie the entire time. It was really cringeworthy and almost to the point where, okay, let's start with this. Nathan, was this intentional? I mean, obviously, Morbius became such a meme. Were they leaning into this? Maybe. I mean, it's so actively bad.
Well, okay, I actually wanted to ask you this because there are parts in this movie where I don't know how they could look, especially some of Dakota Johnson's line deliveries, and go, yeah, that works for the serious tone we're going for here. But at the same token, we'll get into it. They actually removed the most memed line from the trailer, which kind of suggests to me like maybe they're trying to have some people take this semi seriously. It'd be interesting to track as we go along the way here.
Yes, for sure. And yeah, it's on every level, Nathan. I'm gonna throw it to you though first. Where do you want to start here? How do you want to start talking about Madam Web?
Well, the reaction to this is interesting to me. Um I know I wasn't there for like the reaction to Spider-Man 3 when it came out, or like Blade Trinity, another comic book, like these comic book movies that just were very poorly received. But I would say I've been conscious of reactions online to comic book movies since probably about 2012 or so. I have never seen a comic book movie that has like a big budget like this get this universally a negative reception. Like, I compared it with my friends to Fant Four Stick, but I feel like I at least heard some people saying, like, well, Fant Four Stick, it's bad, but it's not that bad. I haven't even heard that sentiment around this. It's just been absolutely raked over the coals by everybody.
Here's my thing, and this is what hurts me a lot because I'm a Marvel fan, for better or for worse. I excuse a lot of things when I see a Marvel movie, right? I grade them on a different scale. Typically, especially in the modern day, they're not great movies. But sometimes I'm like, wow, that costume is really cool, or wow, that action scene was kind of cool. There's always something that like keeps me being a Marvel fan. If every movie was like Madam Web, I would hate superheroes. Like it is like it is actively boring. Nathan, I told you this like I went to the restroom 3 times during this movie. Granted, I have a small bladder, but I can typically hold it. But like every time I got like an inkling that I need to pee, I was like, I need to just get up and do it. Because I just was not having a good time.
Okay, so we need to go into our audience screenings of this at some point here. So your screening, you said people walked out of the theater?
Yeah, what was interesting, so there was it looks like I couldn't really tell, I guess, husband, wife, and a child. Um and I assumed that the husband and wife were taking the child to see a Spider-Man thing, and they
Yeah.
quickly realized this is not a Spider-Man thing. And like again, if they were there for the adults, you think the adults would maybe hang around. I think the kid got bored, which is even worse. Because that's the other thing. Like we've talked about pre-show, Elektra, like a lot of the Catwoman, a lot of these superhero movies that like I really grew up with actually, like I didn't think about them critically. Like,
Yeah.
but it was so bad that a child left.
Well, I actually had a very similar experience. So my audience was great. It was basically I had me and 6 other friends come and see this together. So we were all there for the same reason. We were all laughing at this movie. There was a group of like adults right behind us. They were there, I don't think to laugh at the movie, but realized midway through, holy crap, this is awful. And they were laughing harder than we were. So sitting right in front of me though is this dad who brought his son maybe like 8 years old. And I felt bad for the kid. He fell asleep like 20 minutes in the movie and never woke up. And I feel bad. This movie is if you take your kid to see something like Watchmen, I don't have much sympathy for you because it's like an adult geared movie. This movie, I don't know who it's for. No kid is gonna like this. They're gonna be bored out of their minds. And it's not like intellectual or dark or gritty. It's just really, really bizarre and dull.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I feel like this is in a similar, and I know a lot of people are like think I'm ridiculous for saying this. It's similar to like, a Jurassic Park or a Jurassic World movie where like dinosaurs are freaking cool. You can't really mess that up too hard. Spider-Man is cool. I don't care if it's a woman, like the suit, the webs, the slinging around, the Spidey sense, all that stuff is awesome. Like it's so easy to make that cool. And somehow it's like it's almost like they didn't even get why we like Spider-Man things. I don't know. Like I'm I don't know.
Web show Midnight Screenings years back, they covered Jim and the Holograms. It was a movie in 2015, and they made a joke. The whole movie was their origin story. There was like almost no footage of them actually going on their adventures. And a guy on that show, he said it would be like a Spider-Man movie where Peter Parker's just hanging out with Uncle Ben the entire movie, and at the very end, Uncle Ben goes and dies. And unwittingly, he wrote out a formula for this movie.
Yeah. Um I just yeah. So let's talk about um I don't know, where do you want to go next?
So,
I'm leaning on you here a little bit.
So I feel like before we get started here, we should go into both the press of this movie and also some like behind the scenes stuff with it. This movie was pushed back several times. It isn't quite to New Mutants levels here, but it's to the point to where all of the young women in the cast look noticeably younger than they are right now. Um, and I find it very interesting that Craven was originally slated to come out before this. And they decided to move this ahead um, for some reason. I don't know why. Um, I'll go ahead and ask you, the first trailer came out and it had one of the most iconic lines of the last few years. So if you could go ahead and play the sound clip, Ezekiel Sims.
Ezekiel Sims. He was in the Amazon with my mom when she was researching spiders right before she died.
So as soon as that trailer came out, people were relentlessly mocking this quote, which someone actually brought up to Dakota Johnson. They said, "Oh, have you noticed this meme?" And she acted all coy with it, like, "No, why would anyone make fun of this? That's a perfectly good line." Uh, and I don't know why they cut it if they were trying to make this a meme film. So I do actually think they were kind of hoping this would be taken semi seriously. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, that's pretty damning evidence. I actually, and here's the thing, like Dakota Johnson, Sydney Sweeney, like I sense no fun or joy in what they were doing, and I think actually this line in and of itself, there's no, and I actually like it's not a bad line, like written. It's kind of it sounds like a plot synopsis of something, right? Like it's just the delivery, and I think that was a problem with a lot of Dakota Johnson in this movie. I'm playing it again.
Ezekiel Sims. He was in the Amazon with my mom when she was researching spiders right before she died.
Like it sounds like she's saying this at gunpoint.
That's a lot of her performance in the movie, where I don't know like what they were going for a lot of the time with her dialogue. It's interesting. I read a lot of like press junket interviews for this because I remember we got a lot of gems from that in our Morbius coverage. So I listened to the director and Dakota Johnson talk about this, and they were all about, at the end of the day, this is a thriller, but it's more a character study. And they're talking about like, oh, we really want to add such depth to the character of Madam
Which
Web.
character were they studying?
That's what I'm saying. I By the end of the film, I basically is like, okay, she's an orphan and she was awkward with people and she's slightly less awkward with people now. That's basically the breadth of this character that we have.
Yeah.
So more press stuff behind the scenes. A week after the first trailer was released, Dakota Johnson left her talent agency, which is always a great sign. And then after that, our first look at the Madam Web costume was in the form of a cranberry juice bottle. Uh, they somehow decided that would be a good marketing tactic. And I guess we might as well just play the audio clip now. Had this bizarre press junket thing where she gave this line delivery. You got it?
So, while my character in the movie may be able to see the future, I also can. And I know what the future brings. I know that when you see Madam Web, you're going to love it. In fact, I think you're going to see it twice.
She's lying, first of all.
And she was like looking dead set into the camera the entire time. It gave this weird aura of like she's like trying to seduce the audience into seeing the movie.
Do you think she's still in like 50 Shades of Grey mode, maybe, where she feels like I don't know, like yeah, it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit what we're watching.
I don't get it. I guess I'm trying to think. I saw her in those movies. I've seen her in this. You liked her in Cha Cha Real Smooth, right? Was she in that, or am I confusing her for someone else?
Oh, why don't you filibuster while I look?
Well,
because I know there have been things in the past where I was like, okay, I don't think Dakota Johnson is like a horrible actress. She's not winning any Oscars, but like she does a suitable job. Okay.
I'm looking through it right now. She's been in some decent stuff. Like she was in 21 Jump Street, Cha Cha Real Smooth, Peanut Butter Falcon, Suspiria, Bad Times at the El Royale. Like movies we don't like dislike.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying, like The Social Network. I can't even remember what she was doing in that, but yeah, I mean, like I said, like I felt like she's like I believe Peanut Butter Falcon. I'm sorry, I'm still going through them. Like these are really good movies, and I've always felt like she was competent, and that's where I come into this. This does feel like actively worse than anything I've seen her in. Maybe besides the 50 Shades of Grey movies, those were. I think the last one was
the exact same performance that she gave in those. Actually, like it's a very similar thing to me, where she just seems so confused with every
it's
line.
Like her paycheck. She's entering her paycheck mode where she's just there for the money, and I think she like I want to give her some credit because again, I said this to you, like it is so actively bad that you can't. That's why I'm like, she's lying when she says people are gonna love this movie, because there's no way she believes that. Like, I don't know. It's just I refuse to believe humanity is that low, I guess, is my point.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like when I posted I went to go see this last night, I had the hashtag Madam Web for Best Picture. Like, is she on that level where it's like, oh yeah, you guys are gonna love this. You're gonna watch it twice in the cinema. Trust me.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that's part. I don't know what all the contractual stuff is, but like, I think she's being a good sport for a lot of things, and she was really thrown to the wolves. And I have seen like some of the press stuff, and it's like she's like having to be the face of like some really bad choices that happen behind the scenes. Because as bad as she is, like there were some really like like in a ground level conceptual ideas that would just it was never going to work.
So like I'll go ahead and get her one last press junket thing out of the way that was really bizarre, where she outright said that she has never seen this movie and doesn't plan to in the near future. I don't know if that's an acting quirk, like Adam Driver refuses to watch his own stuff, but again, optically, don't say that to the press.
Yeah. So that's sad.
But in prep for watching this, I went ahead with Morbius. I had a little bit of a reference with Daniel Espinosa. I had seen his horror movie Life, so I thought, oh, S.J. Clarkson. I've never heard of this director. Let me go check out all of her films, and I did. S.J. Clarkson has directed a film before this. And it was called Toast. It was a TV movie in 2010. Um, and I'm gonna be blunt here. I've seen two movies from this woman. I haven't seen her TV show episodes. I haven't seen a competent performance in either of these. So I'm just reporting what I've experienced thus far.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And again, it's so let's talk about also the writer, Matt Sazama. I'm exploring the IMDb now. I wanted to see what he
Yeah.
had made. Morbius might
Yes.
be the best movie he's ever written, because we also have Gods of Egypt and the Power Rangers movie. Not a great resume. And actually, I saw I saw it was a review from Kit Laser on TikTok, and he made a comment about like if you're like striving to be in filmmaking and like you feel like you're not good enough. There are people like this that just pump out horrible stuff and they keep getting work. And so it really is like a hope to like writers and filmmakers out there that like if they can have like a career, like you wrote 3 movies that went to a wide box office. I don't know how well they did, but they all were horrible. So
This movie, actually, the coverage of it has opened up an interesting discussion. I know Chris Stuckman, a popular YouTube film critic, has talked about this a little bit. It's hard to sometimes draw the line of how much credit or lack thereof we give to creators with this. So, for example, we don't I generally don't judge writers to such an extent unless it's their baby. In the case of the writer for this, I the entire week it's been kind of funny because the entire time I've just been kind of defensive, like, "Hey, I liked his Power Rangers movie." Uh, and so with the writers, sometimes I know a lot of the script gets changed as it goes along, so it's harder for me to judge. And I know the same thing kind of happens with directors, but in general, I don't know if this is right. I do chalk it up more to the director for better or worse with these things. I know people have a tendency to say like, "Oh, like whenever it's bad, the studio's to blame." Which I do see what they're going with there, but at the same time, I mean, uh it seems odd to me that they'll say like, "Oh, Into the Spider Verse is really great," and give Sony no credit for that, but only blame them when the movie's bad.
Yeah, no, I think I definitely agree with you there, and I think it definitely favors certain studios because I will say the Sony superhero department, right? There's two ends of the spectrum here. Like the Spider Verse movies, if that third one hits, it's gonna be one of my most favorite trilogies of all time. I love those movies, and then they make stuff like this, and then
Yeah.
you look at something like Disney, where like you might have your favorite like sequel Star Wars movie, but they're all kind of the same level of quality. Same with like modern, like they're not great and they're all consistently not great. And it's because of the studio where like I think we can really look like zone in and on the creators of this particular movie just based on how other movies tend to go in the Sony universe. Also,
Yes.
a question for you. What universe is this in?
Oh, so okay. I so Sony has been dragging their feet on answering this simple question for so long. Um, I remember it was a whole fiasco with Venom. They kept changing their answer. They had Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man like in the background of the trailers, and that wasn't in the final movie. So I don't know if this is true. I can say that it was a rumor from a film journalist. Uh, he said that the rumors around this movie were that they were planning on making Madam Web officially confirm that Andrew Garfield was the Spider-Man of this universe. And the movie was originally set in the 90s because of that. But they realized midway through, oh wait, we don't want to do that. We're going to make it Tom Holland. And then they realized, oh shoot, we can't have this take place in the 90s. So let's say it's the early 2000s. So they had a bunch of reshoots with that, and then they just decided not to cover it at all.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's just so much behind the scenes stuff just when it comes down to like the rights of Spider-Man and like I get like wanting to kind of leave it open. I'm okay with that. I guess it's not even really a complaint of mine. Like if the movie was good,
Yeah.
but it's not.
My kind of I read up on some comics before we covered this, and kind of what you were talking about earlier with the conceptual level of this movie being questionable. A lot of the characters they chose I find very interesting because and I'm not bad mouthing these characters for this, but a lot of them were just there to aid in Peter Parker's character arc. I mean, Madam Web does not have her own standalone comic. She is very much a side character. She like helps Peter along the way, goes into these things, and helps other characters as well. The main villain, Ezekiel Sims, who we'll get to later, he I've read the main comics that he's known for, and he was there primarily to aid in Peter's character arc and go into how his powers work and that kind of thing. So to me, it seems incredibly strange the way they set this up to where it's characters who are there normally to help in the character arc of Peter, except we don't have a Peter.
Yeah, and that's the problem with I think a lot of these Sony Craven, Morbius, like the entire conceit was to be balanced off of Spider-Man, and we don't have Spider-Man obviously. I guess we're starting to dive into the movie a little bit more. We do open on like this, I guess they're spider hunting. But one thing that I found really fascinating about this movie is like there's a bunch of like Spider-Man lore without really telling you anything. There's just like things that are that like I feel like it could be interesting. I'm not always the guy that like needs everything broken down this much, but like it would provide some context maybe if there was like a history of like spider people, but like none of it is really explained to us. There just is a spider, and then there are spider people that have like vague powers, and like it really tells you it's lore without lore.
It reminds me a little bit, and I know this guy's controversial, so I don't want to annoy people here, but it reminds me a lot of what Zack Snyder would do with the DC characters, where he'd take uber specific lore from the comics and then just change stuff arbitrarily and make some stuff unclear. So he's essentially the filmmakers here are expecting us to fill in some gaps with lore from the comics, but we don't have any faith that they're actually going to stay true to those comics. Like in this case, the comics I read with Ezekiel Sims, and they use that a lot here, it was a very similar thing. He traveled to Peru, he did a ritual to get spider powers, and later on he attacked the hero because he was being hunted down because of that ritual. That is the very basic thing, but the entire path getting there was 100% different. And so it really feels weird how much they're cherry picking, because it's not as though like, oh, spiders in Peru, that's the thing that made people love this comic book. So I don't get why they kept certain things over others.
Yeah, I don't know. What else do you have on that? Like, you showed me a snippet of your notes, and I noticed that we noticed a lot of similar complaints, especially at the beginning of this movie, like weird baby that is like the cleanest baby of all time, and it was also like 4 months old, that just came out of the water, and it was not a wet baby. Also,
this
the weird
whole-
spider jumping. There's a lot of weird stuff in this opening.
So let's just go from the beginning. So we're in 1970 Peru. So Constant Webb, who's Madam Webb's mother, is in the Amazon looking for a specific kind of spider. Now, one of the first shots we get in the film is holding her Nikon camera, taking a photo of a spider web. I swear the letters on that Nikon camera couldn't possibly be any bigger. Which one of the biggest themes of the movies here, weird spider web like adjacent placement and product placement. um we have so we have a weird dialogue exchange here. We have Ezekiel's with her for this, and he says, in his horrifically dubbed voice, he goes, I've heard these spiders could give people superhuman strength. And then Constant goes, let's keep this to science, please. I've just heard that the spiders can cure any illness known to man. So, uh, so
Strictly science here.
it reminds me a lot of the Assassin's Creed movie that came out years ago when they're like, oh, we need to keep things based on science. That's why we need to find the apple from the Garden of Eden. Uh, the I gotta I I gotta get into this immediately. Every single time Ezekiel Sims talks in this movie, it was a punchline in the theater. Like my buddy and I, we laughed every time he opened his mouth because the ADR on him is the most unconvincing thing I have seen since Tom Hardy's Bane in The Dark Knight Rises. But at least there's like a mask on him. In here, I don't know what happened. And on top of that, his line deliveries are horrendous. They're some of the worst I've ever heard in a movie like this. So I can only imagine, like, either A, all his dialogue was changed, or B, like, did someone drop the boom mic? What is going on here?
Yeah, that you're asking the questions that I was gonna ask you. Like my friend, like because this doesn't really happen a lot. Like I might see like like a single line that feels a little weird, but to have like an entire person like have an ADR voice is just and very very bad. Like there were definitely like side shots of his face, lips not moving, and just a voice. Like I'm like I don't know if he's thinking or speaking right now, and what I'm supposed to believe. Um, I don't know what could have gone wrong. I did still on the IMDb here. Switch over to this man's IMDb. Yeah, I don't recognize a lot of this stuff. He was in Napoleon. I didn't see that. Don John or Don Juan. Yeah, like movies I've heard of at least, but I don't know.
Like, okay, this man might be the next Marlon Brando. He might be the best actor known to mankind. this is the worst performance in a big budget movie I have seen in a long time. Like, there isn't a single line delivery from him that's okay. He says everything with this really weird monotone voice and this really weird draw to it. Um, Going through with the plot here, the so they go over, we're not superstitious, we just want this magic spider that saves people from dying. And so they like leave, and Ezekiel comes back to camp, and then within like 20 seconds Constant Web comes back with the jar. She's like, I found it, I found the spider. And this is the first time in my theater where the audience started audibly laughing. Ezekiel immediately pulls out a pistol and shoots everybody. um and he weirdly stops with her. Like these random like tour guides, like they can die, but this one woman, whatever. And so he shoots her, he takes the spider. And I loved this brilliant dialogue here. Constance says, but we can help so many people. And he replies, I'm not interested in helping people. No one helped me when my family was starving. My road was not as clear as yours. Truly a complex figure we're dealing with here.
Really just like reading out character descriptions at this point. uh yeah, here's the thing, and I think actually like throughout the plot of this movie, like I can kind of see what they were going with, right? Like I feel like the skeleton of this movie, it could have been something maybe, because like I get it. Okay, he's having dreams that are foreshadowing his death and he wants to stop that, right? Like that feels, the dreams are kind of weird. Feels like a realistic enough story to go with. But then it lacks any of the cool stuff that could possibly go with it, right? Like let's strip like this guy of having anything cool. They call him Ceiling Man for half the time because that's all he does. He's not like a cool Spider-Man by any means. And then the other characters are like gonna be spider people, I guess.
Speaking of spider people, these random like this is another point when my audience started like audibly laughing. These random spider people in like red war paint, and like it looked like fishnets slash bones like came crawling out of the woods to save her. And they bring her to this cave, and they like give birth to her in this cave water after she's bitten, which it doesn't save her, but it does give her power, her daughter's psychic powers, which that makes sense.
She must feel really dumb saying that this spider can save so many people and then immediately die. Damn it, I just risked everything for this.
The this is a through line with this movie. The directing is bizarre. Um the directing combined with the editing, at least. Like in this case, the cuts of the Spider-Man, like the way they're moving, the way they're jumping, this direct S.J. Clarkson apparently has some kind of asphyxiation with like gimbal shots where it like changes from like upside down to right side up or vice versa. And they do that so many times that it just becomes obnoxious. It hurts your head. And they also have this weird habit where they keep like panning right or left, down, that kind of thing. They do it in either one of two ways. It's either like this, where it's in the trees and it's super comedic because they're like panning super, super fast. Or in other scenes, they like pan way slower and it goes down and it reveals nothing, which is also quite funny to me, at least.
Yeah, the spinning shots are definitely annoying. I think what makes it even worse is a lot of times they opted to do that. It was when other characters were also like, either it was during like the very few action scenes when like a character is like jumping and they're also spinning the camera. So it's like you're rotating not only the subject, but the camera in two separate directions. I have no idea what's going on half the time because of it. Like, it is so confusing. Again, like the camera motions by themselves, I could tolerate, but like it's a lot. It's a lot all at once.
Well, and on top of that, it's not even a thing where like, oh, Transformers, where there's so much happening that's hard to make out. A lot of times with this, at least to me, it comes off as a huge crutch because they're constantly moving the camera around to hide from the fact that the choreography is really lacking. For most of these fight scenes, it's even hard to call it a fight scene because it all amounts to him either pushing someone or someone like waving a knife at him, essentially.
Yeah. Okay, so where do you want to go next after we get out of here? I want to talk about this because we're gonna get into Adam Scott's character, Uncle Ben, I guess. Which actually, Adam Scott might be my favorite actor in this movie, especially coming out of Severance, which is one of my favorite TV shows in many years. He does an incredible job there. Really, like, I was a big Parks and Rec guy, but like it really showcased him as like a dramatic actor that you can take seriously, right? So like, again, you know, Dakota Johnson, Sydney Sweeney, they might have passable jobs. This is a guy that I could maybe see winning an award one day if he selects the right things. What is he doing here? And also, similar to Dakota Johnson, I feel like he's just cashing a check because there's nothing, there's no passion in anything he's doing.
So they make it very clear early on that this is Uncle Ben. Um and in a movie full of baffling dialogue and weird stuff that would be quoted, it's amusing to me that the thing all of my friends pointed out as soon as we left the theater was how ham-fisted the dialogue was with him. One of the first exchanges between him and Dakota Johnson is her saying, "Have you never been shot at in Queens?" Oh, like, get it? It's foreshadowing.
Yeah.
The way that they were acting in this first scene with him and Dakota Johnson was so weird to me. I get that there's kind of like what's the word, like black humor that comes from working in like gallows humor is the word that they use for it. Like, they have kind of a stressful job, they're kind of joking here, but the same token, like, a person is dying in the back of this ambulance, and the way that they're talking, you would think it was like a freaking variety show. They're constantly cracking one-liners, and it feels really weird. Did you find that to be the case?
Imagine that being like your final experience, dying in the back of this ambulance with two paramedics wisecracking. Feels it's like it, and I see what you're saying, like that, you know, that could be, you know, some way to cope with something, but also just insanely disrespectful to the person having like the most traumatic experience of their life.
There's a point where Dakota Johnson literally goes, "She's not going room temperature on my watch." Just again, read the room here a little bit, buddy. We get the first great transition here. It transitions from her honking her horn into her in the hospital getting a Pepsi out of a vending machine. Um which is one of many Pepsi product placements throughout this.
There was like a whole conversation about Pepsi, but the weird thing to me was it wasn't like crack open a delicious crisp Pepsi. It's like Dakota Johnson's like, I don't want this shit. Give me a beer. Like she's not like, I want to know what like the Pepsi correspondents had to say about, like, it wasn't like an exciting moment to have a Pepsi.
Okay, let's just go into the Pepsi like right now. So the first Pepsi is them both drinking Pepsi in their like break room, I guess you'd say. And then it's that where she's like, "Get this away from me. I need a beer." And then the final one, and my favorite one of all of them, of course, is when Pepsi saves the day at the end. The entire climax takes place in a building with a gigantic Pepsi sign, and the Pepsi sign ends up falling and killing Ezekiel. So, in a way, Pepsi kind of saved the Marvel Cinematic Universe in a certain sense.
Pepsi was the best superhero in this movie.
Yeah. That's another. Okay, I know we're getting off topic here, but like,
We could jump
I
around. It doesn't
I
matter.
remember in Morbius, like I was telling you about like how Morbius was weird in that this man, he does almost nothing heroic outside of solving problems that he caused. And they tried to one up that with this by just having a person who's not a hero and doesn't really do anything heroic at all. They're really reaching new levels here.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, I think we actually, at some point in the movie, we finally do have, someone with a superpower. But also, like, there are moments, jumping ahead, of course, but there are moments where, like, the three teenagers are like, "Why are you helping us?" And she's like, "I don't know." Like, she doesn't.
Like, neither do we, kids. I can relate to you.
Like, she says, "I don't know. I don't know why." Like that. There's no, like.
Oh, we get a very ham-fisted line. We get two of them like almost back to back because they're in the break room. They're reading their fortune cookies, and Ben says to Dakota Johnson, "Oh, let's see what your future holds for you." And then we go back to her apartment, and okay, another through line with this. There is a shocking amount of similarities between this and the Halle Berry Catwoman movie. And this is one of the first ones. She's in her city apartment and she lets a stray cat inside to drink milk. And I swear this is a real line in the movie. She goes, "Us strays have to stick together."
Yeah. You did it, Nathan. You convinced me to watch this.
Well, no, that
Oh.
was from the movie. That
Yeah.
was from Madam Web.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's next here?
So okay, another obnoxious transition here. She's like doing typical orphan stuff, like, "Oh, my parents are dead, so let me look at stuff from my dead parents because they're dead." And she looks at her like trunk full of stuff. By the way, so she's born in Peru, and this like these like Amazonian tribesmen find her and like help the mom give birth to her, and the mom immediately dies. And the next thing we know, she's like an EMT in New York. Did they like mail her to America? Did they? Can you just do that? Like, oh, she's from America, so where's the mom? Don't worry about it. Here's this baby. Send her away. So anyway, and apparently they went back to the site and got her briefcase. These Amazonian tribesmen, they work in mysterious ways. And so anyway, she's looking at this trunk full of stuff, and she shuts the trunk, and this immediately transitions to her inside an ambulance. The editing in this movie reminds me of like Saw 4. Like, not even one of the good Saw movies. Like, one of them were like, "Notice my editing. I'm so brilliant." And so we see her trying to save this guy who's on this bridge. So this man, I don't know what this dude was smoking, but we need to ban it because holy crap, not only did he break through a cement barrier on a bridge, but he somehow also managed to flip over his entire car while doing it.
Yeah, there's like some severe misunderstanding of first responders in this movie and like the dangers. Like the first rule, like because I went to EMT school for a little bit. I did not complete it because I realized that I don't want to be these people. But like it's you don't put yourself in danger to rescue someone else, because if you are in danger, then you can't help anybody, right? The fact the fact that she ended up in the vehicle and then it went over with her is incredible. Like, conceptually this vehicle teetering on the edge of this bridge, like you should never been inside of there. And we see this throughout, like when there's a car wreck with the ambulance later on, like they just zoom through. Like I realize you have your lights on, but like if you've ever seen an ambulance with their lights on, they stop it 4 ways. Like they don't just zoom through it. Like it really is like, I don't know. They gave a bunch of people that have never seen what a first responder does and said, all right, how do they do this? Like the job is dangerous, and we love our first responders. But they don't actively put themselves in these situations, is what I'm getting at.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I was sitting next to a guy the entire movie. One of my friends is a firefighter slash EMT, and the entire time he was cringing so hard at this. So this guy, he's somehow breaks through a bridge and flips his car over. It's like teetering over. They send one ambulance over, and they just let these like two handle this while they're over there. And she falls into the water while inside this car. And while she's in the water, another similarity to Catwoman, she drowns, and this activates her superhuman animal powers. Uh, and the way they choose to represent it, do you think they're trying to be like Doctor Strange here with this kind of trippy stuff with her powers?
Maybe I guess I could. That's the best way to. I didn't really consider that, but yeah, that's probably what they're going for.
It
Give
ended
them
up
some credit.
looking, the effects on her web, like, and all of that looked really unfortunate. I mean, I'm just gonna put it blunt here. It looked like ghost sperm the entire time, and it's especially bad in the climax because it's like everywhere. And the entire time it's like floating, and I could not take it seriously the entire time it was on there. So anyway, she gets out of the water, and again, these first responders, New York, they are low on volunteers because this woman who's a first responder falls into the water while in this car, and they send one guy to come and help her. So Uncle Ben comes up and saves her, and he saves her from drowning. So he's like doing her vitals, and he says like, "Oh man, this looks bad. You need to go see a doctor." And she has a fascinating reply in which she says, "I don't need a doctor. I trust you." But he just said to go see a doctor.
Yeah, this is also where we get her first, I guess, yeah, her first shot at the future, and things are confusing to her or whatever. Whenever this happens, we get a close up on the eyes sometimes, very much like That's So Raven. I don't know if you've watched that show.
Michael, I'm so glad you brought this up. Raven Simone promoted the movie. They hired her to promote the movie.
No way.
They said, I swear it's like Raven Simone, like looking at her phone. She goes, "Oh, I like women who could see the future."
That might be one of the best decisions they made in the marketing, actually, and it's not that great. So
maybe I'm trying to think. Other than like Wizards of Waverly Place, are there that many Disney Channel sitcoms that have been translated into like serious action films, like based on general premise?
Yeah, no, I don't
Like
think
I'm
so.
waiting for the dark and gritty reboot of like Sweet Life of Zack and Cody or something.
iCarly.
Okay. So we get back to Ezekiel Sims. They cut back to him. He seduced an NSA agent, and this was also a really weird dialogue exchange here. They wake up in bed next to each other, and Ezekiel's like, oh god, and she's like, "Did you have a bad dream?" And he goes, I can't do his thing justice, so just imagine I'm saying this super unnaturally and poorly dubbed. He's like, "It wasn't a dream, it was a vision of what is to come. Every night the same dream of when they kill me." And she goes, "Well, everyone has bad dreams." And it's like, "No, it's not a bad dream. It's a vision. It's a premonition." And he goes, I know exactly how I'll die. And she goes, well, we're all gonna die someday. And again, is this like supposed to be comedic? This woman isn't picking up at all what on earth he's saying here. Um, so anyway, the whole thing here, apparently Ezekiel has like rogue powers where he like drains the life from somebody. And he kills this NSA agent to have live feed surveillance footage of all the cameras in New York. Now, you would really think with technology like that that you would hire a lot of people to look at that. I mean, just think of like I work at like a Target, like we have one guy for that, but I mean, even that's a lot for him. So I'm sure he's gonna hire dozens of people to help with this. I'm just certain. Um,
Yeah, so it was interesting how they kind of set this up because he leads with like technology's advanced so much we can finally track people, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, yeah, really has, today, like social media, facial recognition, like wait, it's 2001. What are you talking about? No, none of this exists. There were still box TVs. What are we talking about?
I think that was kind of the idea. Like, I read an interview where, like, the director was like, "Oh, that's such a cool part of this movie. Not everyone just has cell phones. They can't communicate like that." But this dude has like picture clear video of all these cameras he can just access. And there's some things here, like, okay, I get that the NSA like probably has a lot of control over things, but like bureaucracies are notoriously slow. There's like a lot of checks and balances, but apparently he just needed to sleep with this one woman and get her password. And all of a sudden he has access to everything. He has every camera system, and later on he is able to change all of the stoplights in the entire city to green. Like, can the NSA just do that? What is there any scenario where that would be useful?
Absolutely not.
Or at least like, okay, this isn't a good movie, but like the Die Hard 4. Like, okay, that movie had a similar premise where they hacked into this stuff, but it was like a whole network of hackers. It would be like in Die Hard 4 if instead of that, it was just like, hey, I bummed this password from this one guy. We're in the entire government now.
They are the government.
Look at me. Look at me. Uh, so we cut back to my favorite scene in the movie, the baby shower scene. And by favorite, I mean I could barely watch this again. This was painful. Uh, the At this point in the movie, when she's like having small talk with like some friends, I guess, around this grill, and it's all dialogue like, huh, "Don't give him control of the grill. He'll get rid of all the flavor. Oh, I'll take control. Even worse." And a buddy of mine looked over to me and goes like, dude, this is like a religious film without the religion. And it was a very similar thing. Them trying to build rapport. I mean, the aliens who wrote this are struggling here.
It is like, that's the thing, like, one of these lines, would be like a throwaway, like just something to kind of build the scene a little bit. They have like a whole conversation about the burgers. Like, can we please get to the Spider-Man stuff? And also, here's the other thing. So we get to like the actual, they're like guessing the name, and we know what the name is, but it's played like we're not, like it's gonna be a reveal. And we're like, oh, who is this character? Like, because we don't get the name. They don't ever say it. They leave before they hear the name. But it's like, we know what the name is. Why are you playing with us?
This whole thing was bizarre. They play this game where it's like, oh, what's your favorite memory with your mother? And so they like also put in like little paper slips, and
God, this
like
was so good.
The mother has to guess who wrote which. So the first one she reads was, "My mom always cut the crust on my sandwiches." As though that's some kind of unique thing that anyone like could guess. It would be like me saying like, "Oh, my favorite memory with my dad was when he drove me to school." And then they get she goes like, she pulls out the next slip of paper and she goes, "It's blank. Who wrote this?"
This was my favorite part.
They all look at Dakota Johnson and they're like, "What's wrong with you?" And she goes, "Well, my mother's dead." And they're like, "Oh." And
That's just socially unaware thing to do. Like, why would you put the just don't participate in the game, maybe, or like don't be like don't trauma dump on everyone in the middle of a baby shower? I don't know.
and she like goes in further. This is the one part in the movie where I'm like, surely they're trolling. Like, surely they're trying to meme this. Because then Dakota Johnson immediately starts going into like, oh no, I never had a mom. She died in childbirth. Cut to the pregnant woman in the room, and she goes like, well, but that's rare. She was in the Amazon. They don't have very many hospitals there. Cut back, like, okay, let's move on. Or like everyone is being so unreasonably douchey to her this entire scene. It's really unintentionally funny.
Yeah. No, this is great. Just why would you put a piece of blank paper in there and then also own it and then continue? Yeah, it's a lot. But also another great, just another scene full of like just ridiculousness is when they're pulled out of the baby shower and have to go to their next emergency.
Oh yes. So this is throughout all of this, we're kind of skipping over it. Like, you all don't need to know this. A lot of these scenes are just there to set up how her powers work and how she's learning how her powers work. I found all of this to be incredibly repetitive. And I know that's kind of the idea, is that she's able to see it beforehand, but the way they present it, it just gets so tedious so fast. And this is already a movie that doesn't have a lot of meat on the bone here. And when we're hearing them cover like the baby name guessing like for the third time, it's like, okay, can we move on here a little bit? And so they're at this building, and I guess it's this fireworks building that's like on fire, that they're trying to put this out. Do you want to go into this?
Yeah, just a lot of the like, again, like just a misunderstanding of like what's going on. There's a moment, I can't remember, you're gonna have to help me. Another like laugh out loud moment for me.
Oh, okay. So they're like, dude gets in the truck, like he's in an ambulance. He's like, I gotta go. And Cassie's like, no, I had a vision that you're gonna die. And he goes, no, I'll be okay. Drives off like a block, and this truck comes out of nowhere, just rams him, immediately kills him.
Yeah.
It's straight out of Robot Chicken. I don't know what they were thinking. It was so unintentionally funny.
and totally at fault, this driver.
Yeah.
Like, I would have been like, wow, you really had it coming. Again, like, we don't run stop signs even with your lights on. No, I was thinking there was a moment where like Dakota Johnson reminds Adam Scott like how to do his job. Like, I don't remember the line delivery exactly, but she was like, it's probably like an internal injury. It was like, good call. It's like, shouldn't that be like on the checklist? I don't know.
There are two kinds of injuries. Maybe you should know both of the two. Am I asking too much here?
It's not even like a specific thing. It's either internal or external. Like that should be, yeah. But yeah, no, this is ridiculous. And this character who like, this was the burger guy, right, at the party. And
yes, our favorite.
The only thing we knew about him is that he ruins burgers, and now he's dead. And like, it was played as such an emotional scene, and I was glad he died.
He ruins burgers. He ruins ambulances. The whole
He
world.
sucks. It's like it's one character trait.
So Cassie, after all of this, like, after this, actually, I'm sorry. Let's just go ahead and go straight to Cassie's recovery. We'll get back to Ezekiel. They keep cutting to him, but we'll get back to that soon. So Cassie goes to the doctor, and she's like, I've been having premonitions that like people are gonna die, and it turns out right. And the doctor's like, oh, honey, you just need to go and eat some cereal, baby. Just chill out for a little bit. It's like, okay. No one listens to people in this movie. And anyway, she goes, go home and watch some old movies. And it's hard to say because it's audio, but I imagine in parentheses there it says, please make them public domain for the filmmakers. So Cassie, in the middle of summer, goes home and turns on A Christmas Carol. So it's either one of two things here. Either a TV station just happened to play A Christmas Carol in the middle of summer, or Cassie actively went out of her way to get like the VHS of this movie and turn it on, and she immediately starts bantering with like, "Oh, Scrooge, the future can't be changed, don't you know?" Like, did she turn on this movie for this purpose to banter with it?
She does talk to herself a lot. Yeah, it's very on the
Uh,
nose, this movie.
so I guess we could talk about um Ezekiel Sims real quick because we're kind of getting into the train sequence bit here. Ezekiel, the genius he is, he hacked into the one password, and now he's in control of the entire U.S. government, essentially. And he
Naturally.
knows where all three of the Spider Women are, and they're all going to the same train station at the exact same time on the exact same train. Um, and he, in order to achieve this goal, watching thousands of cameras at once, he hired one whole woman to look at them for him.
Yeah.
And so anyway, this is another one of those shots that like was really unintentionally funny to me. They're like inside the train station. It like starts like way high up on the ceiling and it slowly pans down, revealing that's a train station. I swear that shot lasts for like 6 seconds. Okay. So these three women are on this train, and Dakota Johnson also just happens to be on this train at the same time. And she has a vision that Ezekiel walks in like just normal suit and murders all of them. So she's like, "Everyone, get off the train! It's an emergency!" And so they get off, and Ezekiel all of a sudden is in a Spider-Man costume now. Um, he was apparently totally cool with just murdering three people in broad daylight, and then he's like, "Oh shoot, uh, maybe I should hide my face a little bit here."
Yeah, there's a like couple things like this when like, obviously she's changing the future with a lot of the things going on here. They're not interested in grappling with what that really means or anything. Like I feel like time, whether it be time travel or visions, whatever, like typically there's usually some sort of ramification or something with changing like the sacred timeline, as the MCU would call it, but they have no interest in any of that. Like it's just really random to me.
Yeah, it's and part of the movie. I don't. The tagline of the movie was "Her web connects them all," kind of thing, and this is just such. I'm sorry, a lazy plot like element to put in this movie where so many things and coincidences and contrivances can just be boiled down to like, well, it's the spider web connecting them all. Like we don't need a justifiable reason why all three of these women were in the exact same train at the exact same time right when Ezekiel found them. We could just say the web. I mean, it's a spider like totem or whatever. It connects them all. Um, so it's really convoluted here. Ezekiel ends up killing like I think like five police officers in broad daylight. And then so Sydney Sweeney offhandedly says, like, "What? Are you trying to kidnap us?" And somehow someone didn't see Ezekiel kill five police officers, but they heard that one offhand comment, and now everyone is after Dakota Johnson.
Speaking of like Disney show, like Disney Channel shows, like this seems like a plot of like one of those episodes that's just like, or like something ridiculous like from like Curb Your Enthusiasm, like something Larry David would find himself like involved with, like clearly just absolutely a ridiculous situation.
So I never thought I'd be researching NYC taxi cab like signage rules here. So later on in the film, so Dakota Johnson, she steals this cab and she makes it a point later on to remove the license plate because like people look for the stolen cab. But there's a big old light on the top of it with like numbers and letters on it. Again, I'm no cab expert here. I do feel like that probably signifies something, like maybe that they could help them find something on there.
Yeah, it's an identifiable thing for sure.
I also loved this dialogue here. What we know essentially about Madam Web by this point is she is awful with other people, like just cataclysmically terrible. I mean, earlier we skipped over this, but this kid was like, "Thank you for saving my mommy," and she's like, "Get away, you little twit!" Essentially, and here. They're like, "Oh my god, what just happened?" They're in the backseat, and she goes, "Can you please shut up? It's like a nail drilling in my head." And then there's like an awkward pause there, and then they go like, "So, what are your names?"
This isn't how a person acts.
No.
There's a lot of
Um,
funny stuff with the taxi throughout the rest of this movie. Just since we're talking about the taxi now, I got to mention my favorite is when they're in the woods. How did the taxi get into the middle of the woods? Like it's so out of place, and there's also like trees behind it. Like it's like they airlifted this thing in and like fitted it into the forest. And then later we see her like just zooming through. Like I don't know if you've ever been in a wooded area. Like I don't think you get a taxi in there.
and that's not all this giant yellow taxi in the middle of the forest. Uh, so I actually misquoted her. Her quote was worse than what I painted it as. She said, "Your voices are like drilling in the center of my skull." Again, that is a choice in dialogue there.
Yeah.
So this is probably the biggest, I would say, just outright plot hole in the movie. I know Dakota Johnson, I know they think for some reason she kidnapped these three girls, but even with that, they should still absolutely go to the police here. Like 1,000,000%.
Yes,
Um,
of course.
and all three of the girls, like they may not like her, but they have no reason to say that Dakota Johnson is kidnapping them.
Just be honest. And yeah.
Yeah, like, hey, there's a crazy dude in a black like leather outfit who's murdered 5 cops. Maybe you should look into that.
Yeah.
Can you please help us? Um, and so Dakota Johnson, they get into the woods, and she's like, "Hey guys, just stay here. I'll be back." And okay. Um, and so they're around like this campfire, and Dakota Johnson goes back to her apartment, and she looks in her like chest of like orphan kid stuff, and like she's like, "Oh, she was in the Amazon researching spiders. I already knew this." Um, and so she leaves the apartment, and then it cuts back to like the three girls, and they're like, "You know what? I'm hungry. She's not coming back." And to be fair to them, it's like pitch black right now. Was Dakota Johnson gone for like 8 hours? What is going on here?
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing is they did go. I don't know how. Like conceptually, I don't know how they ended up in the woods. I don't know. To be fair, I don't know a lot about the, I guess the landscape of New York City or Queens, but I imagine you had to drive pretty far to get to like a wooded area.
Well, I guess do they know at this point that Ezekiel has access to all these cameras?
I guess not.
Because
That would
like
be crazy to assume because that would be impossible.
yeah,
But
like so there to me there it makes no sense to drive to the woods. Cuz like if this were a horror movie we'd go, "You idiots.
Yeah.
You don't want to go out in the middle of the woods where no one will be able to find you." So anyway, they're out in the middle of the woods, but they're able to just casually walk over to this diner to eat some. And another weird uh, parallel with the Halle Berry Catwoman movie, they start playing the song "Scandalous" by Miss Teak, um, and so they have the thing where it's like really playing kind of subtly. You can't really hear it, but it's like in the background audio. And then they slowly amp it up as they're walking to the diner. And the choice in where they decided to have the lyrics pop in loudly for minor girls was interesting. The first line we hear loudly with lyrics is "straight talk sex appeal." Like that was a choice in the editing room. They had to
Yeah.
think that through.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing that like I think the marketing for this movie too was very much leaning into like the internet's obsession with like Sydney Sweeney. Like the first photo that came out was of her in like her schoolgirl outfit, like the mini skirt, which is like a really weird thing when you consider that she's a high schooler in this movie. But also
Yeah.
like they're just not willing. They're both like trying to do that, but also not own it. Also, like Sydney Sweeney is like not a nerd. Like you could never cast that person as a nerd. It's just in my like just basic stereotypes. I don't know. Maybe that makes me shallow, but I don't see it.
Okay, Michael, who's more of a nerd? Sydney Sweeney in this or Andrew Garfield in the first Amazing Spider-Man movie?
Okay. So that's a. I guess I don't know. Like and that's the other thing is like there's nothing like particularly nerdy about her besides just being awkward and having glasses, right? Like there's not like the quirk. Like she's not a science kid or like I don't know. Like maybe I'm nitpicking.
The Dakota Johnson comes back to the cab and sees that they're all gone. She's like, "Oh, dang it. Maybe I shouldn't have left them for 14 hours. That might have been a mistake." And she had all of a sudden, we don't realize this, but it's a vision that she has where she drives over to the diner and Ezekiel's murdering all of them. And this is the one thing in the entire movie I give it credit for. This is like the one clever decision I think they made. In the cab that she was driving, it was they were playing Toxic by Britney Spears, and that song played subtly. We thought it was being played in the diner, but it's actually from her perspective being played from the cab. And kind of like when you're in a dream and you could still kind of hear the stuff that's going on around you. I thought that was a clever through line to put in there. So I gave the movie a pat on the back. Good job there, movie.
Yeah, again, just besides the fact that toxic is like the most on the nose possible thing you could possibly play in the scene where this toxic man is spreading toxins. Yeah, I would agree.
So she drives over there. All the girls decide, which is weird. They decide to get on top of this table with all these like high school jocks. Because that's what teenagers do, right? And Dakota Johnson rams into the building like with her car, as though that's not dangerous at all. Like, okay. And then Ezekiel gets in there, and this was another part where my audience started laughing. Dakota Johnson like slams the door, like opens the door to get in the car, and Ezekiel's standing right there, and it like lightly hits him, and he flies back like we're watching freaking Tom and Jerry over here.
Yeah.
And so they narrowly escape. They go to the hotel. So I've gone over it, like my audience laughing at this movie. This, of all the parts in this movie, was the hardest my audience ever laughed. Like, they were laughing harder than most comedy films I've seen in theaters. So Dakota Johnson was like, "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have left you. That was a mistake." And they like all go to bed. And she immediately, I swear, gets up and leaves them again. And this girl behind me in the theater, she goes, "Are you effing kidding me?" And my friend heard that, and he started like busting out laughing because she was laughing, and then that caused another friend of mine to start laughing, and then it caused me laughing, and before we knew it, the entire theater was bursting out laughing, except for the sleeping kid in front of me. So apparently this was just a dream here. Like Ezekiel is like Freddy Krueger. He can talk to people in their dreams now. He has such weird powers.
Everything's very vague and convenient.
And as though his voice wasn't goofy enough, we have dialogue from this man who's like the most horrifically dubbed in history. And the brilliant people behind this decide to make an echo effect around that. So we get to hear his horrible line reads over and over and over again here.
It's like drilling in the center of my head. Whatever she said.
So Dakota Johnson at this point is like, you know what? I'm just gonna, we can't do this anymore. It turns out to be another dream. And she takes the kids to Uncle Ben's house and she goes like, hey, I want to hear this conversation, by the way, where he's like, yeah, you're accused of kidnapping. Here are these 3 teenage girls. Yeah, I can keep them for you. Sure, whatever. I'll hide them in my house. She leaves for Peru.
Well, question for you before have you ever been in a food fight?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't.
Yeah.
I've never been in a food fight. There's like 3 food fights in this movie, and it starts here. It's a small one, but they're throwing popcorn at each other. Like I've got 4-year-old kids. They know not to throw popcorn on like they would get in trouble for doing that. These are high school girls, and I can't remember when the other point is, but there was an odd amount of food throwing in this. I don't know. That's how I tease you. Like if we're out to lunch together, I'm like picking pepperoni off my pizza. And try to stick it on your forehead or something.
Those teenage girls, they throw food at each other and they stand on tables. That's what the kids do these days. I'm sorry, I missed another great scene there where they like go all into their backstories at the hotel, and Dakota Johnson's like, the girls, they say they're like, oh, we're so similar. We all have such similar like upbringings. We all can't go back to where we were before. Like one girl's like, oh, my dad, he was deported recently. I'm all on my own. I don't have anyone to come back to. It's like, okay. So this other girl, she's like, well, you have Dakota Johnson. She's like, she has no parents at all. She is all on her own. Then we get to the next girl, and she's like, yeah, my parents are uber rich and they're on a business trip. I have no one to go to. It's like, huh? And then we get to the final girl, and she's like, yeah, I have no one to go to either. My parents, they got divorced. It's like, what? It's like basically the same thing here, you guys.
That's great.
So Dakota Johnson's this wanted fugitive, and this is 2003. This is right after 9/11, essentially. She's a wanted fugitive for kidnapping 3 children. She could just casually get a ticket to Peru, leave the country very easily. She goes to this place where her mom was researching. And all of a sudden she sees the tribesmen from before, but rather than in like war paint and like fishnets and like bones, now he has like an ascot and like jeans. They went from like more orthodox spider people into more like youth pastor tribe people. They're like, I just want him to have like a guitar, Spider-Man, he gets us. And so he sends her this guy, he's explaining, he said, like, yes, Ezekiel's goals were selfish. He will die for what he did. He's cursed now, and he's trying to outrun that curse. This is, again, the spider lore is so vague. So Ezekiel, you got to remember, this was 30 years ago that he did this, and he's having a dream that in 20 years, these 3 girls will come and kill him. He's cursed to die 50 years from now. I mean, after living a life of like extreme luxury and riches, I mean, I'd sign on the dotted line for that. I mean, you get incredible spider powers, and just 3 spider women may or may not kill you 30 years from now, or 50 years from now, even.
Yeah, and what we've learned about the future is it very easily changed.
Oh, speaking of which, the tribesman reveals to Dakota Johnson that she could be in multiple places at the same time, which we'll get to that later. But he also says, you have the unique ability. You can change the future. Which that kind of feels like an ability I have and everyone has.
Not very super, is it?
Which ability is more impressive? The ability to change the future, or Monica Rambeau's ability to see light?
They're both very groundbreaking superpowers.
So this tribes dude, he's like, okay, he sends Dakota Johnson on this like weird spiritual journey to see like her mom in the rainforest or whatever. And anyway, the they cut back to the flashback with her mom. She's like, ah, man, she's trying to keep me from researching, but I'm almost there. And Dakota Johnson, another point in which a friend of mine laughed. She goes, "Why did you hate me, Mom?" Uh, and apparently, they reveal in a flashback that her mom didn't hate her, which was a myth I didn't know we
Yeah.
needed to be dispelled here. But she was looking for it to cure her daughter because she had like debilitating illnesses or whatever, and so she was looking for the spider for her. And Dakota Johnson, good lord, if she was trying, then I feel bad. Like this performance here is horrendous.
She was not.
Like
Yeah.
she's like, "Mom, I forgive you. You didn't hate me after all." It's so
Yeah. Uncomfortable.
and she says out loud, "I'm so sad. I spent so long being mad at you." Um, yeah, I'm sad you spent that much time too. I feel like that's a really weird extrapolation. Like, if like let's say your dad like dies like before you were born in a like freak construction accident, I feel like it would be unreasonable to say like, oh my gosh, my dad loved construction so much, he hated me.
Yeah.
uh
Right.
so anyway, we get my favorite line of the whole film, which is the tribesmen going, uh and when you take on the responsibility, great power will come.
Oh yes. Yes, of course.
Beautiful reincorporation there. um Let me see. I actually pulled a quote from the director on this here,
Oh,
this
okay.
line. Um let's see. Oh, she said, so an interviewer asked her about why they decided to rework this line. She goes, "We wanted to be honorable of the comics and where she came from. And I think that every hero has a moment where their mentor or someone important to them gives them a line which inspires them on the way. And this felt like a nod to where she was from, while also making it hers."
There you have it.
That was a whole lot of words there.
Yeah. They
So
definitely
do you have
there's a few like just very on the nose Spider-Man references, but also like my understanding of my very limited understanding of Madam Web of the comic books is like it's not really a thing that needs to be connected. Like I don't know. It
No.
just she's not Spider-Man.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So uh what's her name? Like is her name like Mary or something? The woman who's pregnant, her water breaks in Ben's house.
Oh, I have no idea what her name is. We can use Mary.
So anyway, blonde lady's water breaks, and they leave with the girls to go to the hospital. And immediately Ezekiel scanners pick up this one girl's face from this darkened, shadowy area in 2003 camera quality. Okay. And so Ezekiel comes out to kill them. And it's revealed he can turn all streetlights green, which causes a traffic pileup. And he's ready to kill with his spider bomb that he now has. And Dakota Johnson breaks through a Calvin Klein
This is
ad
so good. This is so good.
to knock him over in another really unintentionally funny scene. he leaps up to try to avoid the ambulance, and then it immediately just hits him faster.
Yeah, I was trying to think, like, obviously, well, first of all, Dakota Johnson's number one weapon is a vehicle. She loves to run through things and vehicles. We see this a few times. And I was trying to think, like, because he jumps into the accident, right? Like, it's his fault that he got hit. So I was like trying to wrap my mind around this. Like, okay, she sees the future. Did she know that he was gonna jump up and get hit? So, like, even if I were to, like, if that's my headcanon of the situation, which is ridiculous to begin with, it just means this guy's an idiot that, like, he jumped in front of a car. And also, how did she know? It's the whole thing is insane.
It's very hard on a serious level. Like we like are joking about like the powers being so vague and it being silly for that way. But this isn't us nitpicking. It's a serious problem, especially with the action scenes. It's very hard to be invested in anything happening action-wise because everyone's powers are so vague constantly. Like, I have no idea why people are doing stuff or what they can even do. By the end of the movie, they say, like, Dakota Johnson can be in multiple places at the same time. But I don't even know what that means, like, literally speaking. So this whole action scene, I really just kind of skip through it in my notes because it's really just terrible.
Yeah, and
It's
you're very kind to
essentially
call it an action scene too. Like,
yeah.
there's very little like actual physical conflict that goes on. It's typically like cars blowing up and like three schoolgirls screaming.
Yes.
Yeah.
They go to that like fireworks building to like set up a trap for him, and they purposely set up all these fireworks to blow up, which ends up destroying a helicopter. I didn't know one firework could do that. Like, it hits a helicopter and it blows up the entire thing. That was weird. We have the giant Pepsi sign looming over, watching our brave heroes as they go through this. And it's revealed that Madam Web has the power to be in three places at the same time. So for one of them, she's like helping her up, like with her hand, like, take my hand, I'll help you get up this thing. With the other, she's like, you can do it. You can do it. Trust me.
Yes.
And with the other one, it's the
being
same
encouraging.
Like, hey, you idiot, don't die. Like, oh, thank you, Madam Web.
So there's we got this shot when we see the first time he sees the future, but it happens again when he does actually die. And it's like the most comical way I've ever seen somebody fall and scream. And so they did it twice. That's the thing. Like, they changed the future and now it's happening earlier. So we had to see it happen twice. And both times were equally really dumb and awkward and unbelievable. It's like something out of, like, I don't know, like, Days of Our Lives, if like a character fell out. That's what it like. It's that overly dramatic and stupid.
It reminded me a lot, actually, of the 2019 Lion King remake, where Mufasa falls and he goes, ah, and Simba goes, no. And it reminded me a lot of that. It's funny both times. Another point where my theater started laughing inappropriately loud.
Mm-hmm.
These fireworks work in truly mysterious ways.
Blowing up like concrete walls. Like, the helicopter is one thing. Like, I don't remember where it hit the helicopter, but you can imagine if it hits the propeller in the right area, something would happen. It goes through a concrete wall. You shoot any firework will not penetrate a brick wall. I'm sorry, I won't. Find one. That's why. That's why they call them missiles. There's a fine line between heavy artillery and fireworks.
Turns out apparently the military doesn't need to contract with like the war dogs like Jonah Hill or something. They just need to go to your average like Fireworks USA store.
Yeah.
one of these fireworks actually, it's apparently an underwater firework because Dakota Johnson falls into the water, and this one asshole firework, not only did it somehow escape the building, but it was slanted directly down into the water, and it somehow is so potent that it made its way all through the water, still burning, and it totally blinded her. That one firework, it's a stubborn one, I tell you.
I'm glad you said that because I didn't put it together. That was gonna be a question. I didn't know how she went blind. But yeah, that's also not how fireworks work. So
I
it didn't really explain it to me, but at least I know that there was an intention.
They go back to the hospital, so like Dakota Johnson is now paralyzed and blind, which was communicated horribly.
Mhm.
I knew several people, like not just you, like the people I watched it with did not pick up on the blinding part with the firework.
Mhm.
And the paralysis is weird because I mean, I get that she fell off pretty high, but I mean, it's still water. Like I don't know that that would paralyze you from the neck down per se, or the waist down per se.
Yeah, it's
Whatever.
just. I mean, I guess technically it is possible, but it's just why pick that to be the accident? I guess I don't know.
Well, like,
I don't
and
know.
we literally have another scene in this movie where she falls in water in a very similar set of circumstances, and she's totally fine.
Mhm.
Um, we get our final Uncle Ben line of the movie, where they're symbolizing great power. They're talking about the baby was born and Dakota Johnson's now good, and one of the girls says, huh, he gets to have talking about Ben as an uncle. She goes, huh, he gets to have all the fun without any of the responsibility.
Yes. And that's the other thing. Going back to like that line that they used, like it would make much more sense. It'd be on the nose and cheesy as hell, but it'd be much more uh, understandable if it was said to Uncle Ben. Again, like that's the character that says the thing.
uh they keep doing this in the movie. They've done it with curtains, they've done it with broken glass
Oh, it's
constantly,
everywhere. There's more references to spider webs than there are actual spider webs.
and we get it here where Peter's born, and they somehow make like a hospital curtain like symbolize a spider web. Like it doesn't even kind of look like a spider web, but go off movie, okay. And we get to our final scene where like apparently Dakota Johnson adopted all these kids of varying degrees of like family separation, and it's like uh Dakota Johnson's like sitting there all blind now in her wheelchair, and it's like the music is booming, it's beautiful, like, and the movie's almost pointing it to it like, yes, this is what it was all leading to. And it cuts to them a second time in the whole movie in their suits. Um they used, I'm fairly certain, all of the footage they had in the movie in the trailer of these women in their spider suits. Um Now, I've seen some discourse on this online, of was this misleading? Because it is in the movie, unlike Morbius, where they just outright didn't have stuff in the movie. It is technically in the movie, but I think most of us, there's an inherent understanding that when a suit is in a trailer of a movie, there's an implication that it will at the very least be in other shots that aren't shown. Like, uh, so to me, this is incredibly misleading advertising.
I was amazed how little actual spider action there was. It really is like disappointing because again, like I said, there are bad superhero movies that I can lean on and be like, "Well, that was a cool fight." We don't get any of that. We get nothing. I mean, it's really it's disappointing. Like because again, it's Spider-Man. Just have them swinging from buildings. That's cool.
I actually, when my friends and I were leaving the movie, I had some friends say like, "Well, at least it wasn't as bad as Love and Thunder," which I get that people don't like Love and Thunder, and I can see why someone might like, I guess, prefer this over that. But at the same time, I mean, Love and Thunder, it's an annoying movie, and it like fails in a lot of respects, but like I at least feel like Love and Thunder is a more functional movie as a superhero movie than this is. Like Love and Thunder, even if the action scenes aren't great, they are there. Like people show up in suits, they do what you kind of expect. This just has nothing.
Also, Love and Thunder was trying to be funny and was not. Madam Web was trying to be serious and was hilarious. So I just don't know what's worse between the two. But
Well, yeah, that's kind of an interesting question because, like, this is a terrible movie. I was talking to you about this before we went on. The only Marvel movies like since the year 2000 that I think might be worse than this that I've seen are Elektra and Ang Lee's Hulk. Like this is far, far worse than anything the MCU has put out for sure. I think it's worse than New Mutants. I think it's worse than Ghost Rider. I think it's worse than like whatever you put in that spot. But I will say, as far as entertainment value goes, like this is if you want to riff on a movie with friends, this is a blast in my opinion.
And to be fair, I saw this movie alone, which I think was my first mistake. So I didn't get like that communal experience that you did. So when I did walk in here, you know, I wasn't even coming out of this movie. I was like, that for me, you know, I guess people that have made it this far into the podcast, you're like, oh, should I see the movie? You know, Nathan's opinion that like, you know, it was entertaining for the wrong reasons. I was really, really just bored. Like,
Yeah,
there were a couple points I was like, that's kind of like really dumb. But I was like, again, more so just like shrugging my shoulders and like looking at my phone and wondering when I should go to the bathroom again.
well, I do. Don't get me wrong. This movie is very frustrating. It's very repetitive, and it's just kind of a hard movie to look at times. Like the editing and direction is terrible, and it also it's a terrible plot. It plods along like crazy. This movie is weird in that there'll be just sections where nothing happens, like dialogue that is just desperate to be desperate to be cut down, and then there'll just be scenes where like a million things happens all at once. Very similar actually to like a bad like Transformers movie in that way.
Yeah.
So I will say there are way better movies to riff on with friends, but I think like the right drunk movie night, I think this I would recommend even over Morbius. Like Morbius, I just found kind of bland in its badness. This is like you have to be there for this thing.
Yeah. All right, Nathan, any final thoughts on Madam Web here?
Let me look through my notes real quick. I'm probably gonna kick myself later on. Like, Dakota Johnson had another great quote in the press junket. She said, "I've never really done a movie where you are on a blue screen and there's fake explosions going off and someone's going explosion and you act like there's an explosion. That to me was absolutely psychotic." She clearly is not liking this whole process here.
Right. Oh boy. Nathan, this was a lot of fun to talk to you. I will say, you know, going into it, I was kind of walking out of the theater. I was a little resenting. You know, I was like, you really tricked me. You tricked me into seeing this movie. But it was a lot of fun talking about. We had a lot of good laughs here. I appreciate you coming on. Do you want to? Is there anything you want to plug or tell people to check out or recommend something? I don't know. Anything you want to close out with?
With the Academy Awards coming up, I know you've seen it already. Everyone go watch The Holdovers. It's phenomenal. I don't even know if it necessarily deserves to win Best Picture over some of the stuff it's up against, but I adored it and highly recommend.
Yeah, Holdovers is great. I really do. Yeah, go see it for sure. Zone of Interest, no. That was my recent Best Picture nom. Also, very boring movie. Very bleak and boring.
Both movies have to do with like time elapsing and poisoning's the theme through both of them.
I guess, yeah, we can make a comparison there.
Surveillance, a theme in both of them.
Yes, for sure. Okay, Nathan, I'm gonna close. I didn't know where to go from there. I'm going to close this out. I like to remind you guys to rate and review us on iTunes and Spotify, preferably 5 stars. Also, please subscribe because we're going to be here every single week. Bad Batch is starting back. We're going to have coverage of that. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Star Wars Pod. We also have a Discord community going on, so if that's something you're interested in, you can hit us up and we will get you in there. But that is all we got for you guys. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time. Bye.